What a time to be alive, the age of information. So many people questioning creation. Come, take a seat or step outside to have a conversation. Let's listen, observe, and respond with compassion and truth. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearless Shepherds podcast. I'm here with George. George, it's an incredible yoga studio that we met at Shefa. And the community here in West Los Angeles is growing exponentially. So I feel blessed when I come across people like yourself who embody this presence and embody this spirituality. And this podcast, The Fearless Shepherds, was created around spirit and not just banking on your spiritual practice being on Sundays when you go to church, but it's really this walking embodiment of every single moment of every single day being that spirit. And so when I met you on your super cool yoga mat, probably the coolest one I've ever seen, you had this presence about you, and you had this spirit that can be felt without you having to say anything. And so when I think of who to have onto these episodes, I always want to have people who maybe are practicing religion or maybe practicing faith or maybe practicing spirituality, but on this quest to know deeper what it means to understand self and understand God. And I'm really excited to drop into this conversation with you to understand a little more about what I got to learn about you last night at the potluck, and a little bit about the podcast that you're creating, and just ways that we're seeing Los Angeles turn into this incubator for people to really see why they're here and dive deep into their heart space of the gifts that they were given. And, you know, in my opinion, I've talked about it on a lot of the podcasts, like that's our quest in this life, is to pray and to meditate, so that talking to God and then that listening to God of, why am I here? Why did you give me these gifts? Why did you also give me these roadblocks or these obstacles? And so it's going to be incredible for listeners to hear a little more about your story, because just getting to know you a little deeper last night really inspired me in so many ways. And for those listening, if you want to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do, and maybe how long you've been in LA. And I know you've got a Think Out Loud podcast coming out that's going to be about experiencing insight that helps people move through healing, holistic approach towards life, and you being a coach. I'm really excited to hear more about how that all began, because we're cut from the same cloth in that regard. So the mic is yours, brother.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to contribute my voice to your platform. It was really an honor to be a part of your potluck last night and get a chance to experience the community that you, Stephen, and Mike have built, and speak my voice out into that room. And I'm looking forward to doing that today. So for those that don't know me, my name is George, and I'm a transformational life, leadership, and relationship coach. And I'm a man that's chosen to live life through a lens of intuition, courage, faith, fun, and gratitude. And most recently, I've been inviting myself to step even deeper into a way of being in the world that flows through life with more kindness, more compassion, grace, and surrender. Surrender is actually the number one word that I have for myself this year. And in correlating what you talked about the spiritual practice, there's kind of been this really beautiful journey that my life has taken me on, where I've proven to myself that I can be really successful at what I do. But success does not necessarily mean fulfillment, which we'll talk about later. Yeah. And I've learned that I can have a vision board and have a vision, and I can create those things in life. And when I was processing that with my coach last year, she's like, "Okay, George, great, you've mastered step one." And I was like, "Oh, what's step one?" She's like, "Manifestation." I was like, "Oh, great, yay, manifestation." And then then she said, "Now it's time for step two." And I said, "What's step two?" She goes, "Surrender." And I didn't know exactly what that meant. I mean, I did, but I didn't.
Right.
It's like I conceptually understood, but it was far from embodied, and it still is. But last November, I went through some hardship. After 3 years of climbing and achieving a sense of alignment in my mission and purpose, and doing the coaching work that I do and the speaking work that I do, and building a six-figure business, and building exponential communities and doing really, really beautiful things, I experienced some hardship. I experienced professional loss. Co-founder, my professional partners and I that were starting another coaching collective, we had a breakup.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, I went through a romantic breakup and a romantic separation after that.
It's always interesting when those things happen simultaneously.
The disruption was very much so flowing into my life, giving me a deep opportunity to surrender.
Yeah.
And I read Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, recently, and that really kind of solidified this understanding that my mindset has a preference. I want this. I don't want this. I want this relationship. I want this business. I want this partnership. And I don't want X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And then there's this, what life unfolds for you. And there's this practice that I'm stepping into, very much so spiritual, because it's connected with still who I am and who I believe what I believe I'm here to do, but also a function of letting life take over. And it's not this passive waving the white flag and retreat. It's actually a double downing on what's most present right now in my life and giving 100% commitment to those things, giving it the best presence I have, the best effort that I have, but leaving just enough spaciousness for adaptability and flexibility for the universe to bring something that is actually probably better than anything I can ever imagine.
Yeah.
Somewhere along my manifestation journey, I actually learned that reality is way greater than fantasy. And it's the surrendering to the unfolding. My old mentor, Tony Robbins, would always say that it's in the moments of our decisions that our destiny is shaped. So choose wisely. And I was a man that was always very much so about control. I loved control because control was my protection mechanism.
Yep.
It was my way to feel safe, a way to feel significant and important. And it helped me find certainty in an outcome. But life has a way of teaching us that we don't have as much control. We aren't in control, but we are in charge.
Wow.
We can adjust the way that we show up and respond to the unfolding of life. And actually, this romantic container that I was in introduced this notion of destiny to me, but in a way that caused me to actually not just see it and conceptualize it, but to experience it, and actually how we came to be and how we met, and how we didn't decide it. How my mind said, "Oh, I don't think I am. I don't think this. I don't think that," but it just presented itself.
Right.
Like there was no choice. And so there's kind of been this interesting path in my spiritual journey right now about the parallel truths of both decision and destiny. And the reality of it is I don't have all the answers. I'm very much so in my experiment of seeing how it goes.
Yep.
I have a belief system of faith that the universe has my back.
Yep.
As I'm taking my business, taking my mission, taking my service to new levels that are into the unknown, where I've been focused on going very deep, which is very low quantity of clients, but very deep and high quality. Now I want to go wide. And seeing what you guys are doing in your community of how many lives you're touching on a consistent basis is been really inspiring for me. And actually, what was keeping me up last night from sleeping was thinking about how are different ways I could take shards of what you guys are doing and create that within the Shapeshift community, which Shapeshift Coach is my LLC.
Shapeshift. I love it.
And the whole idea of that is it's the caterpillar butterfly metaphor that we often hear in self-development. It's the caterpillar has to go through a morting process,
Yep.
a calcification, a solidification of that version of itself, and then shed that version of itself. We have to shed our old beliefs, our old habits, our old patterns, our old ways of being in the world, or sometimes even values that we think are ours when really they're our parents or their societies. And we have to let those go. We have to let those die off. We have to go through that ego death. And then from that, the phoenix rises from the ashes, the butterfly forms, and it's this shape-shifted version of a new version, the 2.0, if you will.
And surrendering to that, knowing that it's happening for you, which is such an embodiment of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And something that you spoke on yesterday that I thought was so powerful was that accident that you were in. And these moments in life when, whether or not we believe or don't believe, there's something that is bigger than us, that gives us that glimmer of hope in the darkest of moments. And I'd love for you to share that experience, because it was eye-opening to me, of you feeling something outside of yourself tell you that it wasn't your time to go. But in a way of encapsulating, God or the universe speaking to you. And I think a lot of people who are listening to this are looking for that moment. And when you try to control God and, okay, I'm ready to hear you, God, like that's not the way that it works. For me, it was in COVID. It was in COVID when I was in one of the lowest points of my life. Like, God, this is so gnarly. Like, why is this happening? This warm hug came over me of, I have you. All of the things that are happening for not only you, but for the world. Like, get out of your head and take the eagle eye perspective and control what you can control. And just take that next step and surrender.
I've had my fair sharing of yelling at God.
I think that's a part of the human
Here's my
experience.
list of demands, God.
Yeah.
Make this shit happen.
Yeah.
Thanks for teeing up that story. What I'll share with the audience is before the story is this deep understanding I've learned in life that information doesn't change us, but experiences do.
Yep.
I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 7 years. I hated it.
Yeah.
I learned about religion every year in school. Read the Bible. Was an altar boy. Mom made me go to church every Sunday. Absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
Like, rebelled against it. It didn't resonate. The stories didn't land. I didn't correlate it. I didn't understand the notion of living in fear and the focus on sin.
Right.
And it just none of it jived with me. And to your point about connecting with God, answers come from really abstract places.
Yeah.
They come when we don't even know that we're listening, or we don't even know that we're about to experience something.
Yep.
Speaking of in the moments our decisions, it's in the moments of our decisions that our destiny is shaped. When I was 16 years old, I made a decision to get into a car with a drunk driver. We were drinking at my friend's house, and we got a call, and we said, hey, there's this party up the way. And so me and 3 other friends got into this car, and my friend who was driving had been drinking. And really quickly, he started speeding. And I lived in Palos Verdes. I'm from Los Angeles, so born and raised in LA, from a suburb here. And it's a very hilly neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he was speeding, going 80 miles an hour through these switchbacks. And I remember just thinking to myself, holy shit, this is really stupid.
Yeah.
And I was drinking a beer in the passenger seat, and I rolled the window down, I threw the beer out the window, and I put my safety belt on. And within about 10 seconds, he's hitting this curb, he's hitting this turn by my old middle school, Mira Lest, and the car hits a puddle.
Oh, dear.
And the fishtails, slides out, and then it starts sliding across the street. It hits a curb, rolls over, and then falls off of a 100-foot cliff.
Oh, my God.
The last thing I remember was just my whole body shaking, and then I blacked out.
Yeah.
And I started coming to, and the car's face down in the ditch, and I see this really bright light, and I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on, and it's like, the sounds are ringing in my ear. And I realize very quickly that the car that we're sitting in is completely on fire. And fight or flight kicks in, right? My nervous system's pumping, and I'm just reacting. I'm trying to open the door, and I can't even really see, but the door is not opening. It's stuck, and I'm trying to kick it with my knee, but we're in a very compact space, right? And I realize that we're pressed up against the cliff. So the door, there's no way the door is going to open. And I'm looking back in the fire, and I remember just thinking to myself, this is it.
Jeez.
It's over. And then I sat back in my seat, and as soon as I sat back and gazed into the fire, my friend comes to, and he starts shaking me. And he's like, George, your window is down.
Mm.
And because I rolled that window down just seconds before the car flew off that cliff, we all managed to escape through that window unscathed. And we were climbing the cliff all the way back up to the top. And I actually almost fell backwards, and my friend had to push me back on the cliff.
Jeez.
And by the time we got to the top, the ambulances, the fire trucks, the police cars, the sirens were all there. And it was like a scene from Law and Order, where it's just very slow, very surreal. And by the time we got up, the fire from the car was at eye level to where we were standing. And I remember just looking at the fire. Never seen a fire that big before in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember looking into the stars, and for the first time in my life, I felt something. I looked up at the stars, and I just felt this sensation that someone up there was looking after me.
Yeah.
And when I had this moment of insight, there was just this voice that came through me that was so clear. It wasn't loud, it was just clear.
Yep.
And it just said, not yet.
Dude, it gives me chills.
I looked at my friend Connor, who was in the back seat, and I grabbed his head, and I was like, we should be fucking dead right now.
Yeah.
Like, statistics should be 99%. Everyone should have died in this car.
Yeah.
I looked at him, I said, you and I survived this for a reason.
Yep.
We are here for a reason. And I had no idea what that was then. But to your point, that was... by the way, I didn't even process this story properly with depth until... Gosh, I was probably 16 at the time. I didn't process that story till I was like 31. And I realized, though, when I went back, I was like, oh my God, that was my first experience of faith.
Yep. Even after 7 years in, a Catholic school where you're supposed to be learning about God, but internalizing this fear is actually driving you away, not from God, but from the representation of what religion and church hold, which is, I think, where so many people are, is this like, I want to feel loved and guided and supported, not controlled, and that aspect of fear. Like, I'm reading Conversations with God right now, and it has changed my perspective so much on prayer and on who God is and on why I think so many of us have drifted from the church and are now drifting back towards God. Is because we yearn for this hole within our soul to be filled, and we can try to fill it with pleasure or work or substance, any of these things. And we'll dive into a little bit what you talked about yesterday about fulfillment and work and the aspect of success compared to the aspect of fulfillment. But in my personal experience, the thing that has brought me the most quenching towards that thirst is the surrender that I am looked after, that I am provided for, that even if the goals that I have don't come to, and even if all of my work doesn't pan out the way that I want it to, like, letting go of that wheel and that surrender is the most free and the most fulfilled that I've ever felt in my life. But for that experience to be kind of the catalyst of your journey in this spirit of like deepening the understanding of spirit, I think it's so profound that you were able to, at that moment, have that epiphany with a friend of yours of like, it's a high probability that we were supposed to die just now. And obviously there's a reason why we didn't. And that kind of was a catalyst towards what you spoke of a little bit yesterday of like really taking the reins of your professional life and, scaling up the corporate ladder. And if you want to talk a little bit about being at the top of the, corporate food chain and having everything that life tells you you're supposed to have and feeling that hole still empty, that unfulfillment towards your purpose and towards why it is that you're here. And so I think that's something that so many people can relate to. And for me personally, I can resonate with that of being a young 20-year-old man, working my way up a ladder, having everything that society told me I was supposed to have and that would make me feel like the king that we all want to be, and feeling empty and feeling alone, even though I was around so many people. You're actually around people who are using you or who want what you have, and those relationships are so superficial that I think a lot of us in Western culture and in the world are starting to see through the facade that we've been told for so long of what brings us happiness compared to what brings us peace. And so if you want to share a little bit about your journey through the 20s of receiving all that your hard work brought you, and where that left your heart and your soul space.
And the story continues.
It's never ending.
I once, there's something that's coming through recently. It's like, if you want to be a good storyteller, live a good story.
Come on now.
And take the time to reflect on the story.
the story of our lives.
Well,
And that's what's so beautiful about pods is we get to reflect on that and open up about our story.
That's it. That's why my podcast is called Think Out Loud. It's because it's the process of slowing down in order to speed up. It's the process of where we take space to think out loud and where we create insight. And where insight is born, where we see ourselves differently. The profundity of life is not in the complexity. It's in the simplicity.
Come on.
And that's why it always has such a deep resonance with us. It's like, wow, something so simple has so much power behind it. Yet I thought power meant complexity. And I've learned in my life that it doesn't. And so, speaking of profundity and purpose, again, none of that lexicon was available to me when I was 16 years old. But in that car accident, I thought to myself, my life was spared for a bigger reason other than me.
Yep.
And it's my obligation to figure out what that is. So I get really curious and I start asking questions. But when 16 years old, growing up in the early 2000s, you're getting all these answers about where you find happiness and meaning in life. You go to school, you get good grades, you get into a good college, you get a good job. For me, it was study finance and study business and get a job in sales, make a bunch of money, be able to surf when you want, be able to have the beach house, all that kind of stuff, right? Yep. So let's fast forward 12 years from that moment of the car accident, from 16 to 28 years old.
Yep.
I had done that.
Yep.
I'd done all those things, went to a good college, got a good job, was making six figures, was making like 20 grand a month, was the number 2 producer for a $2 billion a year company, had a team of people reporting to me. I walked on water at this company.
Yeah.
People respected me for what I'd accomplished and what I knew and wanted to model it. And the interesting thing about success is that I learned that the more successful that you become, the more of an imposter you can feel when you're not in alignment with who you are. When you can climb up to the top of the mountain, but you feel lonely at the top, what I learned is that you got there the wrong way. Yeah. I got there the wrong way. I got there through the competitive, sharky nature. I got there through being a bulldozer.
Yeah.
I got there through a maniacal perfectionist mentality that worked. It was a winning strategy for success, but it was a losing strategy for fulfillment. And I learned that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And it wasn't until a relationship breakup, which happened to be with somebody who I was dating on my team.
Always a bad call.
Bad. Well, one knows, but you learn. You live and you learn. But yeah, that was an interesting era. But one day she said, I'm leaving. I'm going to go move back to Chicago. And I lost my business partner. I lost my roommate. I lost my romantic partner. And what that did was expose all of this unhappiness, because that was where my protection was at the time. My shield from the realization that even though I was living in a great condo near the beach in Playa del Rey, and even though I was able to travel the world and making a bunch of money, I was lonely.
Yeah.
I was unfulfilled. And I was like, what the fuck? I did it all right. I literally followed the model.
Yep.
I did what you told me to do. And that spiraled me into a depression.
Yeah.
It spiraled me into an identity crisis, because everything that I had chosen to be and everything that I had chosen to do didn't lead me to happiness and fulfillment. And at some point you realize that more is not better. And so there's just this depression, which is just disconnection with self, disconnected with my spirit.
Yep.
And it was the greatest gift that helped me finally answer the question that I asked myself when I was standing above that cliff looking into the fire. Why am I still here? And it was through the darkness that I learned and discovered Burning Man, which helped catalyze my healing after 9 months of depression. And then very quickly after that, the universe unfolded this opportunity that I didn't choose to go and experience a Tony Robbins seminar, Unleash the Power Within. And when I saw Tony on stage in front of 10,000 people at the SAP Center in San Jose, and everybody was breaking through their shit, everybody was breaking through in tears, including myself, I realized, I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm here.
Yep.
I'm here to help people break through their mental and emotional blocks that are holding them back from achieving true happiness. achieving the goals that are going to make them feel like they're living a life of passion and purpose and peace. And I had always had a passion for helping people, specifically through talk therapy, specifically through being like, what's going on in your relationship? What's going on at home? How are you feeling? I've always been very introspective. I picked up meditation when I was 15 and picked up yoga when I was 16. I had always been interested in why do human beings do what they do?
Yeah.
Why are some people really, really successful and really happy and other people aren't? Why is it some people are first generation millionaires that come from nothing, and then some people who come from everything do nothing with their life?
Right.
Where's the contrast? What is it? And when Tony helped me actually understand the answers to all those questions, and then helped me understand why I was doing what I was doing, how my craving for certainty and my craving for significance, because I was bullied and teased and dealt with racism and grew up in a multicultural background where I felt like I was too Asian for the whites and too white for the Asians.
Wow.
And we are all in this search to overcome two fears: the fear of not being enough and the fear that I'm not enough, that I'm not worthy of love. And then we turn that into a winning strategy for how we go out into life to achieve being enough, and achieve being significant, achieve being important. And therefore, if we're important and significant, we'll then be worthy of love. We all have our winning strategy in our mind subconsciously of what we think it's going to be. More money, more real estate, more cars, more women, more men, more. We think that's more because we live in that Western society where we are taught that more is better. But we have to go through this evolution and this journey and this awakening process, this becoming conscious of how these things aren't serving us. And you simply cannot get enough of what you don't need.
God. Yeah, Jesus told the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the only way that you'll get through the gates is to have the mentality of a child, of to like really let go of all the control that you think you have and this high horse that you sit on as this religious elite that say you're all about kindness and loving your neighbor, but cast this judgment over the sinners. He's like, I'm not going to hang out with you guys. You have some work to do. I'm going to go hang out with the beggars and the outcasts and help them to understand and see the divinity within themselves, which is the same as the divinity within you, but you cannot come to God without stripping that. And I think for me, meditation was this time where I was able to feel a presence outside of self. Because when I'm praying, it's really me. It's this self-talk where I'm just throwing up to God, okay, I want this to happen in my life. And that's kind of a product of our society of more. And sometimes that can create anxiety towards, all right, God, like I'm ready to receive all these things. This is my plan. I did this great job. Okay, now I'm ready to receive. And God's like, that's really cute. That's really cute. We're gonna give you some time to continue to surrender. And I think God speaks to us so much, and this is a quote from Conversations of God, but God speaks to us lastly in words, more so in our circumstances. So our circumstances in life is a representation of, you can call it God, you can call it self, because they're one and the same. But like you were saying, the decisions that you're making is the manifestation of the reality in front of you. So in order to see and have the epiphany at 28 of, I've climbed this ladder and I've reached everything that I thought was going to cure that child within me that was bullied, that was outcast, that felt alone. All that led you to understanding that I actually need to heal that rather than obtain more. And we all have that scar within us. And so to allow yourself to let go of the more and to find nothing and strip yourself down to nothing, for me, that's what meditation has taught me. And circling into the practice of wellness and the practice of meditation, what is one thing that you would recommend to somebody for a meditation practice? Because I talk about this with all guests of like, what does wellness mean to you? And what are some practices that you've developed, not like in the studio, it was awesome to meet you in the studio, but the self practices? Because a lot of the clients that I work with, it's like, I want to work with you for 2 to 3 months, and then I want to come to a point where you can implement these things and integrate them on your own and not be dependent upon anyone else. So I think for you to come to that realization at 28 and then pivot and have that epiphany and then moved more towards your purpose has created a lot more peace and a lot more purpose in what it is that you're doing. Did you say that was spearheaded by a wellness practice, or was it that Tony Robbins seminar that really like spearheaded it, that then led you to different practices to help you to kind of integrate those? Because everybody can have that high from going to a seminar or going to a music festival, or like I met Michael at Same But Different, and then we were talking about like, how do we bring this energy back into real life? Okay, let's make a plan towards health, wellness, spirituality, community, and let's literally see these things come to just by stepping into it and doing it. Like we were talking before we press record, a lot of times you make all these plans and it takes you away from the actual doing of the plan. So for you, what was the aspect of wellness or healing that you were able to embody that has changed your life since that epiphany at 28?
Yeah. Well, let me close the loop on something that you were talking about earlier that I think maybe some of the audience is wondering, okay, if you had success but not fulfillment, then where did the fulfillment come from? And I think there's an important distinction to be made here about what success is and what fulfillment is. And this is what the interpretation has helped me. Success is about external gain. Fulfillment is about internal gain.
Yep.
And they're not necessarily connected with one another. And what I've learned is, and I'll quote Tony on this, is that pleasure's in the body. It's ephemeral. It's very quick, and it comes quick and it goes quick.
Yep.
Money, success, promotion, you can celebrate these things, but then the joy of it, the happiness of it fades very, very quickly. It's like sex. It comes and it goes. It's quick. It's ephemeral. But happiness, and this is very connected to what you were talking about wellness and meditation and that sort of thing. Happiness is not something that you pursue. It's not something external. It's a mindset.
Yeah, it's something you are.
Eventually it becomes an embodiment, right? But the beginning awareness is to understand that happiness is a mindset, which means it's very simple. Life is a matter of about two things. What is it that you're focusing on, and what does it means? I can focus on this conversation with you right now and be incredibly grateful because I'm grateful for the chance to speak, or I can be like, oh, Kyle's not paying me to be here, and I'm not getting paid to do this.
Right.
But you can be experiencing something in reality and have two completely different internal experiences based on what's the meaning that you make behind what you're focusing on.
Right.
So happiness is just about understanding how the mind works and how we can start redirecting our focus.
Wow.
And the meaning that we make behind what it is that we're focusing on.
Right.
Now, joy is something different. Joy is in the soul. And one of my a spiritual mentor, Guru Gauranga Das from India, he says that when the soul is in its nature, it experiences peace. When you experience water and you look at water in the early morning at 4 a.m. on a lake, you experience peace because the nature of water is calm and is peace. The soul is in its nature in service. We are social species. We are designed to help one another.
Yep.
Yet we have forgotten that. Service is the pathway to fulfillment.
Amen.
Purpose is the integration of service aligned with your gifts, your passions, what you like, what you dislike, what you hate, what you love, and also in this day and age, what you can make a living doing.
Right.
The Japanese call it ikigai. And that combined, when you can align those things, you can align your path toward a purposeful life based on service and helping other people.
Yep.
And I bring that up because people then ask themselves, what do I love? What do I hate? Now, this is where we start talking about spirituality. This is where we start, in other words, connection. Right. I define spirituality as connection to source, to life source. That life source within you, that life source within me. And in order to know you, I have to know me. In order to be connected to you, I have to be connected with myself. Yep. The caveat to connection is that I can only connect with you as much as I know who I am. I have to know who I am. I have to know what I want. Thomas Cooley says that I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. But I am what I think you think I am. Which means that most people are doing a second job that no one is paying them for, that no one is helping them do. It's managing the perception of what other people think. And that takes us away from connecting to who we are in our truth.
Yeah.
And so why is meditation so important? Why is having a physical practice so important? Why is opening up the body through yoga so important? Why are all these practices around cold plunging and wellness? Is because in order to connect with this thing called spirit, we have to first be able to connect through our mind. We have to connect to our body. We have to connect to our emotions. We have to connect with our energy frequency that we vibrate on.
Yep.
And therefore, when we have open channels, we can connect to source, internal and external, within me, within you, within the omnipresence of life. And so meditation is one of the very early journeys of beginning to just step outside of the drama of being the experiencer of our thinking and step into more the observer of our thinking. When we can create a sense of separation that we're not our thoughts are mostly just preconditioned programs, and that we have 80,000 of those, probably like 60% operating subconsciously, which means we're not even aware of them.
Crazy.
The meditation practice allows us to take a step back and just be the observer.
Yeah.
Not be attached to them, not be associating with them and getting caught up with them. And the practice of meditation that I learned from Tony Robbins was more of like an active priming, because if you're anything like me, when you're first starting out, you have a very active mind.
Yeah.
Sitting still is really hard, really challenging, really frustrating, really annoying, and your body just doesn't want to do it.
Yep.
So it's actively starting to, again, go back to what I was saying about happiness, shift your focus and shift the meaning.
Yep.
And so the recommendation I have for all of my clients when starting a mindfulness practice and meditation practice is don't worry about stillness, but focus on what you're grateful for. And being able to channel just 3 things that you're grateful for one at a time. And it's not like, oh, I'm grateful for this conversation today with Kyle. Check. I'm grateful for that. I had a great podcast episode before this. Check. I'm grateful for food on the table. Check. It's not that. It's focusing on one thing and saying, wow, I'm really grateful that Kyle invited me to this interview today. And the way that makes me, and then after you focus on that thing, it's adding the elevated emotion on top of that thing that you're focusing on. So what's the thing, what's the matter, and what's the emotion?
Right.
The emotion I feel is connection. The emotion that I feel is love. The emotion that I feel is excitement. And taking space to breathe that in, because the breath, this thing that keeps us alive, literally brings in life force into our body. It also has the ability to move energy within our body. Emotion is energy in movement. Emotion, energy, motion. So when we start to move that emotion through our body by channeling breath, by simply just imagining breathing in the feeling of gratitude. And then as you exhale, pushing that emotion through your body, visualizing that it's moving through every bone, every muscle fiber, every connective tissue, every organ, and every 27 trillion cell in your body, and breathing like almost like a swelling of a sponge, you now start to embody this emotion of gratitude. Now you can do number 2.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that today is sunny today.
Right.
Because it's been raining yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And the way that the sun makes me feel is warmth. It makes me feel light. It makes me feel like a new beginning.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like, although my grandfather died last night at the dinner that we happened to be at when I got that text, today is a new day. The sun shines today, and I can feel that. And I can feel the presence of that, right? And when you start to practice this day in, day out, it takes time.
Oh, yeah.
Great things take time, and people have this unfair relationship with time and patience. But when we just continue to practice, because repetition is the mother of all skill, there's a neurological change that happens in our brain where we start to now change the habit of what we focus on as to seeing what we have versus what's missing. And because of our reptilian brain that's 10,000 years old, that's relatively unevolved from the time when there was a lot of scarcity, which means we had to focus on what was missing in order to survive. We don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
And for the most part, most people in this world, contrary to what most people believe, do not have to worry about their survival on a day-to-day basis, worry about food and water. And so we have to start making these conscious changes in the habit of what we focus on to be focusing on what we have. Because when we focus on what we don't have, what are the emotions we feel? Fear, scarcity, guilt, shame, apathy, anger, these very low vibrational connected frequencies. And when we show up in life from these frequencies, we're more stressed, we're more contracted. We don't see things clearly. We don't feel deeply. We lack connection.
Yep.
We're not able to be productive. We're stressed out. We're burned out. And we're just not as effective at being human.
For real.
So meditation takes us into this new way of being, this new way of focus, this new way of operating, from changing our wiring to our inner brain, from changing the way that our nervous system responds, and therefore changing the way that we think and feel, and therefore act, and then therefore create results in our life. And it's all starting with a fucking gratitude meditation.
Yeah. With stillness.
Yeah.
We've been taught so much that if you want anything, you have to go get it, and you have to pursue, and you have to obtain. And it's so contrary to what we've been taught. But to sit in stillness, I always like to visualize the ocean. I love the aspect of water. The waves aren't always crashing. The waves aren't always receding. Your breath isn't always inhale. Your breath isn't always exhale. So that visualization of inhaling the waves receding, exhaling the waves crashing, it can calm the monkey mind. All of a sudden, you can take yourself to the ocean. You can be the water, and you can start to feel that, like you said, you're bringing life force into your being, oxygenating every cell, and then purging carbon dioxide and all of these things that body doesn't need. This body is working tirelessly around the clock to do what our physiology needs to stay alive. And when you can start to conceptualize that as the base point, it opens up so much to be grateful for. And that, like you said, is such a beautiful baseline for your meditation practice. And you were talking a lot through that about emotion. And a lot of what I talk about on this podcast when I have males on is divine masculine, and how in our culture, for me, my relationship with my father was helping him heal from wounds that were passed down from his father. You just shared that your grandfather passed away, and you shared a little bit last night of how your grandfather came to this country with nothing and created something that is so epic around a restaurant and community and service. I think that the masculine as a whole in our society, it's healing, but there's also this push against it because of the toxic masculinity that has been portrayed through so many different leaders and so many different aspects of different cultures. And so have you noticed, since that epiphany for you at 28, have you noticed a better opportunity for you to get to know that emotional side of yourself? Because I think in the journey of your 20s, you were hyper masculine, of do and accomplish and, bulldoze over anybody in my way. I am the man that I know I'm supposed. Like, that toxic masculinity has pushed our spirit so far away, because I truly believe our emotion invokes our spirit. And I truly believe that the Holy Spirit is a divine feminine. It's a feminine entity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I truly believe that. And it's something that I think the church has missed tremendously, is like pushing women out, even though they are so integral in our in ourselves as men. We have this divine masculine and divine feminine coming from our mother and our father. But have you been able to see in your healing journey and in your kind of evolution of becoming the man that you were created to be, have you had opportunities when your grandfather was here to talk to him about different aspects of emotion? Because I know in my personal experience, my father, my grandfather, emotion wasn't something that you brought to the forefront as strength. It was actually looked at as weakness. So is that something that you see as a part of kind of this awakening and this spirit movement that's starting to happen, is kind of this freeing of our emotion as men to be able to be vulnerable and share these things and these traumas and these hurts?
It's interesting because when we go through the awakening journey as conscious men in this era and in this generation, there's this feeling of responsibility of healing the generations before us.
Yeah.
I remember actually interviewing my grandfather like a couple of years ago because I wanted to start a podcast and I wanted the first episode to be an interview with him.
That's incredible.
And we actually spoke for 3 hours. And
that's incredible, man.
And if I'm being honest, I actually walked away from that conversation kind of disappointed, because the profundity that I found in interviews is the emotional depth and the connection that I feel to the speaker, because they are able to evoke and explain and express themselves in such a deep way.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great it's not to his fault of his own. It's a deep understanding in our journey that for me, looking back at him, I cannot fathom what it is like to be living with your family at 15 years old, 16 years old, and another neighboring country starts to invade. And then your parents look at you, who, by the way, you've always felt neglected from and kind of not accepted by, and look at you and say, you need to take your little brother, who's 13, and you need to leave. Just go. And what it is like to run through the streets of China for a year with your little brother, not knowing where you're going, killing rats to eat food with BB guns, and then moving to a country where you don't speak the language and starting from nothing. The reality of it is that it wasn't too long ago where our grandfathers and sometimes even our fathers' generations were living in scarcity.
Oh, yeah.
Were living in a time where they did not have the luxury of having space and stillness to feel emotion because they did need to actually fight for their survival.
Right.
And then, between raising 8 children and starting a restaurant, you just didn't have the luxury that we have to do this thing called personal development. So there's a compassion toward that generation that I've learned I actually don't have to fix my father. My role is to accept him exactly for who he is, knowing that he's always done the best that he could, given the timing of when he was raised and given the experiences that he's had and given how close he was to that generation, being raised by that generation. My dad always told me, he's like, look, George, I'm going to teach you everything that I've learned about life because your yaya, my grandfather on my dad's side, the one that died yesterday was on my mom's side. He's like, he never said shit to me.
Yeah.
He didn't talk to me. He didn't address me. He taught me nothing. I had to figure everything out on my own. So my dad taught me everything that he learned that worked for him, that was his winning strategy at that time. It worked for him. But some of those things were outdated. And so when we go through our journey, we get pissed off at our parents. But the deeper practice within the practice has been to accept that what worked for him did work for him.
Right.
Based on his conditions and his timing and his situation and circumstances. Are there other things that don't get met as a result of those winning strategies? Are there dark sides to that? Absolutely. Right. Is it our job to fix that? No, it's not. Our job is to love them.
Right. And
witness where it falls short in our life. And that's where this notion of, okay, this old patriarchal and then the resistance that you were talking about to the masculine archetype is as a result that there was some toxicity that came as a result of this. There was the seeking of power, the chasing of women, all these behaviors that we frown upon now, right? Yeah. But when you talk about emotion, it's important, I think, to distinguish that when we talk about masculine and feminine archetype is that we all possess these energies within us.
Yeah.
Both of these masculine and feminine energies exist within us to create synthesis within our life. And the feminine archetype, is the way I understand it, is about love and expression and emotion. The masculinity, and this isn't, we're not talking about gender here, right? We're talking about energy.
Yep.
Masculine energy, feminine energy. The masculine is really about is seeking freedom and providing structure.
Yep.
The women is about seeking love and looking for expression.
Yep.
And so when we talk about men and their lack of emotional expression, we're actually talking about men starting to access and awaken their inner feminine.
Right.
And then when we're talking about the divine masculine, it's our ability to embody presence, stillness, and space that enables that inner feminine within us to express itself without the fear of being viewed as weak.
Right.
And now this leads into the conversation about vulnerability, right? Someone at the dinner party last night told me this great quote that said, connection happens at the speed of vulnerability. And that as men and as boys, we're taught this very contradictory thing to be brave and to be tough. And then we're taught that emotion and vulnerability and crying is weakness.
Right.
And yet the way that Brene Brown defines vulnerability is that vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure is also the thing we experience when we're being courageous, when we're being brave.
Yep.
In fact, there is no courage without vulnerability.
Yep.
And so we're taught this paradox in life to be brave yet to not be vulnerable, because vulnerability is weakness, helplessness, and defensiveness.
Right.
And yet it couldn't be more the opposite. And so it's when we can provide safety within ourself and structure, that we're enough and that we're valid in our emotions, we begin to start going through a healing journey of being able to express ourselves. I was really lucky. I grew up with my father, who was very much so about structure, type A, like certainty driven, and my mother, who was like an art history major and very feminine and very expressive, and she's a spiritual chaplain. And like, so I actually, and being the firstborn, I take actually genetically more so from my mother. So my sensitivity has always been my greatest gift.
Yeah.
But I hated it when I was young because I didn't know how, I didn't feel safe to express myself.
Were you able to connect with your father? Or was that a bit of a bridge for you?
My father and I really started connecting deeply, actually, because my mom's way of raising me was no longer working because she was raising me through the old school punitive measures.
Right.
And I'm a rebel. I rebelled.
Yeah.
So
we can relate on that.
Yeah. So my dad was like, all right, this isn't working. Like, I need to start taking over. And my dad's like very practical. He's like, look, I'm going to teach you everything about life, and this is the way that I've learned things. And he spoke to me in a way that was very real. So we connected very deeply from like a student to teacher relationship when I was young. And my dad taught me about peak experience. He was an avid sailor. My dad sailed the world. My dad sailed with Roy Disney and won the Transpac race to Hawaii. Like,
incredible.
He taught me how to surf when I was young. He taught me how to fly fish. He taught me how to ski. He taught me how to exist in nature. So I'm very like, I have this beautiful polarity between masculine and feminine from my mom and my dad that I'm super grateful for. And that although like for me, my journey has been how to find harmony between those very strong energies within myself. The work that I've been doing recently about this, like, okay, this divine masculine that is being talked about.
Yeah.
It's where we can hold presence for the feminine. Yes, within ourselves, but also with females.
Correct. And
where we can create safety for them. And it has to be genuine, right? You can't do this to like get in girls' pants.
Trickery, correct.
You can't use this for manipulate. The difference between influence and manipulation is really intention.
Correct.
It's the same process, but it's your intention, and your intentions have to be pure. You have to be able to actually want to be in service to the feminine.
Yes.
And that is our role as men. We are there to provide the structure, and when we can provide the triad of stillness, of deep breath and presence in the face of the feminine is very distrusting right now, and as they should be. But when you show up embodying that space that you hold softens the feminine,
and it gives them
the
freedom.
Safety and freedom to express themselves.
So powerful.
Which is what they're searching for.
Correct.
And it's my work to be able to do that within myself first. And as I'm able to integrate that within myself, I can show up and embody that. And John Wineland calls it coming from the core. And I'm coming from this core when I'm speaking here now.
Yeah.
I come from the core when I'm on a date. I come from the core when I'm speaking. It's the difference between being in the present moment, which is aware of my surroundings and keenly like attentive, to being presence.
Right.
The space, the stillness, the calm, being able to hold the feminine in all of its radical expression, in its rage and its joy and in its anger and frustration, but just being able to hold it unwavering and just saying, it's okay. I accept you and all of you for who you are unconditionally, and I'm here to serve you. I'm here to support you. And not fix you, not change you.
Yeah.
Accept you for all of your humanness and all that you are as you are today, and just hold that. And just hold that. That's what it is. That's our role, I think, as men.
Definitely. That's what I took from that beautiful monologue that you just shared. Thank you. Was it's not our job to fix our fathers, our grandfathers. It's not our job to fix our partners. And when we can release that, it's such a freeing moment to, again, hold space. And that helps us to step into our purpose and our calling as men. It fulfills us, which leads to the point, I think, of this conversation is finding fulfillment through the work that needs to be done on self in order to see that in others. And that's the basis of this community, was built on our intention. And our intention was to create this pure container where anyone could show up, and when they walk into the door, all their expectations dissipate, and they feel like they're walking into their home. And for me, I grew up in a family. Mom and dad are still together. Shout out, Tim and Chris. Love you guys. Big family, 4 sisters and a brother. Great extended family. I was so blessed, and I am who I am today because of the family that I had. And because of the relationship I was able to have with my father, and a big part of Divine Masculine is embodying that fatherhood. And then having a mother who was able to teach me about my emotion. And I was around strong women who were unapologetically emotional. And it helped me to see as the firstborn son, like, I have this rigid dad who comes from a history of inability to tap into emotion. And I've talked about it a lot, and we won't go into it, but my dad and I had this moment where I was kind of the whipping boy of the family, and he had this moment where his rage took out on me. I was out cold, unconscious. He had this moment of like, oh my God, I've never dealt with my emotional pain, and I'm repeating a cycle on the person that I love more than anyone, my firstborn son. And my mom had the strength in her emotion to say, you need to go work on yourself before you can be anything for this family. Big shout out to Dad. We've had some crying sessions about this, but it was the first time when my dad came back after doing work on himself that I saw him vulnerable. He was crying. I hated my dad in that moment. He apologizes to me, and in that sincerity, in his vulnerability, I was able to accept his apology rather than harnessing this resentment. And I think that is so much a part of our Divine Masculine rising, and of what you were saying of like these past generations having very little opportunity to do this work that we're able to do, that we're so gifted to be able to do, that I truly believe is ushering in this new earth, that is ushering in revelation, not the ending of the world, but a beginning, a lifting of the veil, so that we're able to hold the container and create these communities so that there's lighthouses everywhere. Somebody said last night, I wish there was a house like this in every community, and there will be. I've had visions of it. This is why we created this. So the purity behind our intention is why we're seeing all the manifestation begin. And like you said, it's so simple, but in our complexity society, we're like, that's too simple. I can't know that. I need to work through all these issues and problems. And God is just continuously telling us, like, what is your intention behind what you're doing? And are you coming at it from a pure heart? And that leads into a question in spirituality that I've always had is, are we innately good and pure, or are we innately evil and bad? And then, like, reading the Tao. We've been doing this meditation challenge the last 31 days. Shout out to Eben. Going back and forth between Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius and do the right thing and, you control your destiny, to the Tao Te Ching, which is you are the same as nature. Nature is ever changing. Water is ever flowing. You have no control. There is no right and wrong. These things are happening for you, and you are the observer, not the reactor. And those things are so counter in their belief, but their overlap is so strong. And when you start to, for me, what really has evolved my spiritual practice is coming from a Christian Catholic background that casts judgment on anything that is different and says that you're going to burn in hell forever if you don't believe this, to starting to teach yoga about 7 years ago, learning about Buddhism and Hinduism and atheism like I had never learned in my upbringing. Wow, these are all branches of the same tree. There's no difference. And God is not this white guy with a beard sitting in the clouds that I've always thought it was. And so it's this unconditioning and stripping and surrendering to the nothingness, becoming this empty vessel, that then I think the Spirit starts to move through you and show you really what love is and what purity is. And I think that is a gift that was given to us through Spirit, and it's why this is all happening. I think it's so beautiful that you were able to experience the community yesterday, and that you feel called to create community. And like this movement is happening in all of the souls around the world. It's why we see women in Iran standing up, saying enough is enough. It's why we see people in China standing up, saying enough is enough. People in Africa standing up and taking back their sovereignty and saying, I'm willing to die for what is pure. I'm not afraid of the fear that's being pushed to us in all facets, like through media, through social media, through advertising, all this stuff. So it's like we're on the front lines right now, but unlike our fathers and our grandfathers, we've had time, and I think COVID was a blessing for us to take a pause and look inward towards, why am I here? What is it that I have control over, and how can I heal that wound within me to then go out into the world without an attachment to healing others' wounds, knowing wholeheartedly that everyone is coming from a place of purity, and holding that space is going to, I see in the next, really this year, 2023, and that was my next question of what is in 2023 for George, like a true awakening, it's probably happened in human history with, so many different histories being erased. And I think a lot of what we know now as our history is just a fragment. And I think we're actually remembering the divinity and the connection that we all have. So it's so inspiring having these conversations with people like yourself, because I always say we thrive off enthusiasm. So to see you speak in the way that you do shows that you take time to hold yourself to this aspect of purity, and you're doing the work day in and day out. It oozes from your being, but just by hearing you speak with such passion and such grace, it's an absolute honor to have had this, hour to sit down with you and understand deeper who you are. And that's what I love about these pods too, is I kind of knew who George was, but this builds a friendship that is lasting and that we can connect on and then grow further, and to support one another in this endeavor of creating community around what we love and what we're passionate about, and to show people that it's possible to create abundance, not for the sole purpose of creating abundance, but for the intentionality of creating more opportunities to serve. Which, remind me your grandfather's name?
Alphonse, but we would call him Gungi. Because in Chinese, gung gung is grandfather, but the kids, none of us speak Chinese, so we're mumbling our words as babies, and gungi just became the word or the name. So
he said he had a world-renowned restaurant, and I opened a restaurant with my sister when I moved up here to LA. Opening a restaurant is a thankless job. You do it not for the money. You do it to serve people and to see them not only full of food, but full of what it feels like to be loved unconditionally. And so God bless Alphonse Gungi. And last night you spoke, and I kid you not, I saw him standing there with his hand on your shoulder, just like, I'm so proud of you. And I think what stands out so much from this conversation is it's not our job to heal anybody but ourselves. And in doing so, we're able to go out into the world and effortlessly heal. It's like Christianity. So much of it is like this evangelism. Go save the world. That's not our job. And I think it's really cool to be able to have these conversations around spirituality without casting judgment on whether you call God God, or God the universe, or God's self, or whether you believe in anything. It's like we can just hold space and share this divine miracle of life and usher in this enthusiasm for our own story, which in turn inspires others. So it's not imitation, it's emulation. We're able to see each other step into these uncomfortable situations of believing wholeheartedly that you're capable and worthy of everything that you're calling in, which is this first step of manifestation, but then surrendering to let go of any expectation of what it's supposed to feel like or look like, and then all the glory and beauty comes in. But 2023, what does it have in store for you? What are some intentions that you have? And maybe tell the people a little bit more about Think Out Loud.
Yeah, well, you that was just such a beautiful monologue of spirituality right there, man. I mean, there's some nuggets there.
That was God speaking through me, brother.
I could feel it. It was just channeling. That's what I love about Thinking Out Loud, is that when you're in the state, there's something that flows through you. And
what is that something?
It's source. It's spirit. It's the divine essence that is love.
Yeah.
I always tell people
God
that
is love.
I love the question, who are you? Who am I? And because we watch as we go through our process of realizing that we've oftentimes defined ourselves by what we do.
Yeah.
What our job is. But you notice in the very beginning of this episode, I talked about my values, and the way that I found those values is through hardship, is through that car accident. I was like, oh, that's an experience of faith. Oh, going through depression and not killing myself, that's an expression of faith and courage. Being able to start my own business, that's courage. And I'm wrapping this because a spiritual practice that I found to actually be very practical in practice is, if you're listening to this and you're getting insights about a way of being in the world that resonates with you, whether it be faith, courage, vulnerability, connection, hope, whatever it is, living consciously, people often ask, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Well, you get to decide.
Right.
The question is, what does one small act from that value that you got look like in your life right now? Where does your life need a little bit more courage? Where does your life need a little bit more faith? And what does that look like? What's the step? And choosing to take that step is that tiny step. Not, we want the 10 steps, just the one. Take the one. What's an action of courage? Because we're constantly making decisions, and we're either making decisions from a place of courage or from a place of faith, or from a place of fear.
Yeah.
We're either choosing our comfort zone or we're choosing courage. We're either choosing fear or we're choosing faith. And we're either choosing to resist or we're choosing to surrender. And so it's like, what is the step from surrender look like right now? Oh, that's right. When I go through professional loss, surrendering is being able to choose to practice 1% more acceptance.
Yep.
It's choosing to ask myself, how may this rejection be redirection towards something even better? How could this be creating space for something better in my life? You don't have to have the answer right away, but you do have to hold the question.
Yes.
And you do have to look into life with curiosity. What does being curious look like in your life right now? And where focus goes, energy flows. When you ask a question, it redirects your focus. And that's a really important... I love spirituality, and I also love science. And I love the intersection of spirituality and science, because we're now starting to debunk that from like an energetic perspective.
For sure.
And so it's like, when you can kind of... I love to really talk up high, and then I love to bring it into like, okay, what's the step?
Totally.
What's the integration step? And that's a spiritual practice.
Definitely.
Because it's guiding you back to what your truth is. And the reality is, we're going to make mistakes. That's why life is this constant experiment. Be a researcher. Try things. Be willing to fail. Ask yourself what you learned. And then be willing to apply that forward again and again and again, and realize that that is what we mean when we say there is no destination. It's just a journey. To answer your question right now, I'm on a journey to take my mission wide. I'm on a journey to continue creating community. And, I co-led a Burning Man camp of 120 people last year.
Incredible.
You've seen me in the chef community. I mean, I remember when I was brand new to chef and I knew nobody. But when you're trying to create community, it's really about asking yourself, what is it that you love? And are you willing to go and be a little courageous and go out into the world alone doing the thing that you love?
Yep.
Because when you do, what I've learned is that your people are already there waiting for you to show up. And that's where I've reset community after reset community after reset community, probably 3 or 4 times now. And I felt like I was doing it again, just being in your community last night.
Yeah, man.
I came alone, right? But I came alone, but there's an alignment of values, there's alignment of interests, there's alignment of passions, of service, of conscious living, of healthy living. And it's like, check, check, check. Great. Like I know that I've wanted to come here for several months now.
Yeah.
And I am looking to take my voice wide this year. I want to touch more lives this year. I feel an obligation that I'm not doing enough, not for my self-worth, but I'm not touching as many lives as I can be.
Yeah.
So speaking on here feels like a privilege, because that's in alignment with what I want to be focusing on. Starting my podcast, which is going to be called Think Out Loud, which is airing on February 20th. Monday, President's Day, February 20th. We're going to do a double drop with a trailer.
Let's go.
So that's exciting. And the truth of the matter is, there's reckless abandon and a lot of faith with that, because all the other coaches are like, how are you going to monetize it? Do you have ads? What's your evergreen program, mastermind program, group container that you're selling on the other end of that? And the reality of it is, I don't have any of that right now.
Yeah.
And while those things may be things I'm exploring this year, I know that the podcast is my next step.
Yep.
It's my next step of courage. It's my next step of faith. It's alignment with my mission and my purpose to inspire people. And I don't know what the outcome is, but I'm choosing to take the step.
Yep.
And I think there's going to be a variety of things that come from that.
Totally.
I think that hosting things in person, doing speaking engagements within your community,
Without doubt.
hosting group workshops and group coaching containers. I'm thinking about creating a Heroes Academy for aspiring coaches, like some of the folks I met last night, where I can tell they're not all in on it yet. There's a little bit of fear there. They've been doing part-time this, and I want to really help support a community of coaches because I can only make so much of an impact in the world, but if I can impact 10 people and those 10 people can impact 10 people, now we've just 10x that to 100 people, right? So it's like I do see that as an opportunity of growth and expansion for me this year. But I'm also in surrender. I'm going all in on what's most present right now, and I'm serving who I'm serving all in right now, and I'm just being curious enough to see what life brings.
Yeah.
Life brought me this opportunity to potentially facilitate a workshop in Turkey for a 4-day festival in May. At first, my mind's like, oh, Turkey, it's far. It's not going to pay much, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's with deep friends of mine that are starting their version of what you guys are doing, but in Switzerland.
Incredible.
And they want to host this thing in Boncuk Bay in Turkey. And they've invited me because there's mutual inspiration there. And, there's kind of this just like, fuck it. Let's go. Like,
Spirit
that's what
movement.
the universe brought.
Yes.
That's what the universe brought. And there's my resistance to it, but then there's just surrendering to be like, you know what? The universe wants me to do this. It actually, when I look at it, it's alignment with who I am, what I do, and why I feel like I'm here. I have to give myself the opportunity to experiment and try.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen, but that's the biggest practice of surrender, is not knowing what the outcome is going to be before you start. And trusting with faith that everything that is meant to be in my life will be. And I'll try to have a little fun along the way too.
Hallelujah, dude. Dude, I'm taken back. I mean, it's just so cool again to when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was praying for, brotherhood. I lived in San Diego my whole life, and I have a core group of brothers that I'm still close with to this day, and it was so hard to find brotherhood. Because I think in this culture in LA, it's so much about me and how does this benefit me and how can I bulldoze your ass over so that it can benefit me. And it's like I definitely feel as though I've found a brother and prayers answered for you coming last night and seeing the community and speaking on ways that you can, help the community continue to grow, and then for you to take strides in your community, how we can help yours. And this is 23, I've been telling everybody, 23, we're going to look at this year as a year where we all did what was necessary to heal ourselves and to really believe wholeheartedly that we are capable, we are worthy, and to step into the unknown with faith.
Last night, before we started this podcast, you asked me how I slept, and I told you that I didn't sleep really well. And the truth was, what I didn't tell you then that I'll tell you now is something that was coming through for me in bed was like visioning doing like a mindset workshop in your backyard with your community.
Come on,
and
dude.
I'm just like getting a whiteboard and just like, my corporate clients will, I charge them 15 to 25 grand for a workshop like this, and I'm just like, let's just do it and let's just have fun with it. Like, no, it doesn't need to be anything. We don't need to worry about. We'll figure out something on where that way we get people who are committed, but like we'll make it really accessible and we'll make it fun. And that was like kind of coming through me really powerfully. And I just saw that happening. And I'm just presenting that to you live. You don't have to make a decision on it now, but it feels, the brotherhood that you feel is received and reflected back to you, man. Like ever since I did my first ice bath with you at Sheffield, like however many months ago, I was like, man, these guys are operating at a full on Tony Robbins level fucking 10. I mean, making
all in, dude.
All in. And I was like, man, and I've like grounded my energy a lot, but it's just like so infectious being around your passion. You live with inspiration, you live with passion, you thrive in community, you're creating it, you're making the world a better place, you're making the lives of the people here better. I can feel the transmutation. I can feel people coming in and being like a little intimidated and a little bit in awe, a little bit imposter syndrome. I felt that from a lot of people last night. I can see it in their faces.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you've built the right thing.
Right.
My coach, Rich Liffin, he says that in order to be a part of my community, I have to be in a little awe of you, and you have to be a little awe in me. We
Without
both have to be
question.
feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, otherwise we're not around the right people.
We thrive off enthusiasm.
That's it. And it's just like, when we remove the competition and realize I don't have to compare myself to you. No. Dude, let me say this. The biggest reframe that I found really helps a lot of my clients as well as myself is that when we can evolve comparison to inspiration, how is that person embodying something that I want to see more of in my life, and how can I transmutate that and evolve that within myself? When it's not, oh, he's better than me. That's a judgment.
Right.
But when he's like doing something that I want to be doing, that's inspiration. And inspiration begets new action and new results. And it's just like, you just, again, that simple mindset shift.
Yeah.
It's whenever you catch yourself comparison, just be like, how is that a reflection of what I want that I don't have? And how can I create that in my life a little bit more?
Yeah.
1% more, 5% more, 10% more. And, you know, that's what community does, is it pushes us to be better. And it pushes us to get through hardship when we're not sure that we can. It reminds us that we're not alone, because we think in this time we have to go through life alone, and we think that we have to do it by ourselves, and we don't.
No.
The Ubuntu saying, right? The African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And this is a new era of where we go together, brother.
And bro, it's incredible to know that everything that you just said, I receive. And also for those listening, I go through the roller coaster of life just like everybody else. But by stepping into this courageously and showing up, even on the days where I'm like, all right, we got another day. I'm human. But by surrounding myself with people like Michael and Steven, my girlfriend Clarissa, I'm able to lean in to these people who I look at their lives and I want to emulate the same energy that they have and possess. So it fuels that fire. So anybody listening, like you just said, going at it alone is treacherous. It can be daunting. It can be full of fear and doubt. When you have one person near you that holds you accountable, that loves you unconditionally, it splits it in half. And then you bring another person, splits it in half. And you're not just bringing people to bring people. You are, from a quantum level, this is what I need in order to be successful. These are the areas that I'm not strong. And being real with yourself in meditation on the things that come forward. In the stillness, the mind starts to wander. You start to judge yourself. You start to look at your schedule. Anxiety, fear, this, that, control. Open your hands. Just open your hands. Let go of expectation and just breathe. Feel that ocean within. And just allow yourself to be guided. Mm-hmm. If you mind, I'll pray and we'll wrap up.
Beautiful.
Thank you again for being here, George. Dear God, we welcome you into this space, knowing that you are sitting here the entire time. And we are just so grateful for the voices that you have given to us and the freedom to be able to share these voices and to feel that flow of spirit in every word. I'm so grateful for our health, for the opportunity to dive deeper into what health means, not only on our physical, but in our mental, our emotional, and to just understand a deeper spiritual health, deeper understanding of this purity. I pray for the world to feel that and to understand your intention behind giving us life and behind us waking up today and having this new opportunity to serve others and to pour from a cup that is over full. And I pray that people who are feeling a lack of direction or a hopelessness, that they're able to feel your spirit and they're able to feel this direction, God meaning good, orderly direction, this steadfastness in knowing. And I pray for George, his podcast that he's about to start, that you bless it, all the endeavors that he's shared, all the experiences that he has had. You just continue to shine through him and help him to, grow wide like he asked so effortlessly, that you're bringing so much into his life and you're going to bring more than he could ever imagine through him taking these leaps of faith. And I just pray over the community that we are both stepping into and creating, that you continue to bless it, you continue to guide us and give us the strength and the courage and the faith to be the change that we wish to see, and to just envelop that faith and that courageousness that we spoke of throughout this conversation. Bless the rest of this day. Let us move with joy and with celebration. And thank you for this home that we are building. Pray that you continue to bless it, bless those who live here, and bless each and every individual who's able to come. And let us move into this year, like we spoke of, with this knowing that we are capable and worthy of all of the prayers and all of the messages that you shine through us, and that we are the children that you have created for us to receive the gifts that you bestow onto us, that we're able to keep our hands open and walk in faith. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Oh.
Peace, peace, peace. Excited to head over to Shefa Yoga here soon and practice with you. And
that's my church, baby.
Yeah, straight up. Shout out Yancey and Rocket, dude. Hopefully, have Yancey on someday. But
right.
Again, thank you for being on, and stoked to continue the brotherhood and all that awaits.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It's been an honor, man. It's been really fun.
Another episode of the Fearless Shepherds podcast coming to an end. We'll see you on the other side. It's amazing how quickly conversation goes when you're speaking about life and God. A lot of these questions that can spark fear, spark judgment. That's what this podcast is all about. And really, that's what life is all about, is to step into faith with a yearning for knowledge. So if you want to learn more, if you want to donate to the cause, my name is Kyle Cassidy. I am the founder of the Fearless Shepherds, and I cannot do this alone. So I would love to hear from you more. You can follow our movement on Instagram or TikTok at Fearless Shepherds. My personal account, Kyle Cassidy Fitness on Instagram, or shoot me an email, spiritmovement3@gmail.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. God bless.